Welcome back, once again, adventurers, to Let's Play ChäoS Child. In the last episode, Takuru, Hanai, Mio, and Momose are watching and waiting for Serika Inoue, one of the killers in the second New Generation Madness serial killings, to explain herself. And she did, confirming Mio's assessment that she is in fact a real Buddha delusion of Takuru Miyashiro's imagination, brought into being on the night of the third melt. Shortly after he arrived at Tokyo General Hospital and was once again cruelly abandoned by his own parents. But that wasn't the only revelation that Serika Inoue had for Takuru, for the identity of her confederate has finally been revealed. And as I said in the last episode, I really thought it would be Suichi Wakari, the hapless, guileless club advisor from Heikyo Academy. My reasoning? When Serika and Ito went to look for Watabe, it was Wakari that brought him to the empty room and then left him there until his inevitable demise. Unfortunately, well, I didn't rule him out as a suspect, but neither did I acknowledge him as such, even though his photo was there. I wonder what would have happened if I had selected his photograph. Would Takuru have exonerated him or not? But either way, that is a moot point. So Wakari was crossed off the list, leaving two other names. The second one was Gen. But a man of his noble stature, well, given all that he did for Takuru, yeah, Gen definitely wasn't going to betray us, which left only one other suspect. And because of the way the conversation between Serika and this other confederate had gone, yeah, the second perpetrator of the second New Generation Madness serial killings was none other than Wataru Sakuma, the man running Aoba Dorm and Aoba Clinic, who in reality was a scientist working at Tokyo General Hospital, more specifically the basement facility where Senri Minamisawa was being kept. Yeah. He was a researcher of the Nozomi Corporation, even though that name hasn't come up, at least not yet. But speaking of Nozomi, Sakuma is waiting where all this nightmare started. And not just now, but 6 years ago as well. He is waiting at the planetarium, where Ganishi Narose's terrible device known as Noah 2 was being kept in secret. And if history repeats itself just as Sakuma has orchestrated, then tonight, November 6th, the 6th anniversary of the third melt in the Shibuya earthquake, there is going to be another terrifying catastrophe. And we have to stop it. Each time I took a breath, more cold, nasty sweat poured out of my body. Yeah, Sakuma was trusted by Takuru and everyone else, including Yui and Kurisu. But because they were Gigalomaniacs, yeah, he orchestrated their deaths. Serika might have been the one who had taken their lives, or rather, no. Sakuma made Ito take Yui's life instead. That's right. But Sakuma was behind the whole thing, just to kill all the Gigalomaniacs that had awoken as a result of the third melt. Something that wasn't planned by Ganeshi Narose, I might add. But that man is dead, along with his own confederates, the original perpetuators of the first New Generation madness. And soon, Wataru Sakuma will join them in that death. But for now, Takuru is still coming to grips with what has just been revealed to him. What was going on? What the hell was happening? I've been asking myself the same question for a long time now. Yeah, as much as I and Mio Kunasato would definitely not see eye to eye on certain things, the time for feeling sorry for yourself has passed, Takuru Miyashiro. It's go time.
立てるか?
Unfortunately, we're not in a position really much to either refuse or do anything, because if we let him be, catastrophe is going to strike. But if we try and get to him, then the police and the media, thanks to Sakuma's own machinations, will immediately go after Takuru Miyashiro, because Sakuma has framed him as the killer. Serika slowly offered me her hand. And yet, despite the fact that she aided and abetted Sakuma in these tragedies, Serika Noe will not betray Takuru Miyashiro. I think you're gonna hate me for this, Takuru, but it's an olive branch we need to take. Her voice was different, but it was the same Serika. I went to grab her hand and stand up, like I always did. And yet it was Serika herself who killed Nano Kurisu. And then I smacked it away without thinking. No, that's not what you want to do. My head was still a mess from everything that had happened, but I could feel my temperature rising. I thought once more of my sister's death, and my rage was just barely enough to support me. I stood up and glared at Serika. The urge to vomit had left me at some point. And yet, it has to be said, without you, Takuru Miyashiro, without your imaginations, without your delusions, Serika Noe wouldn't even exist. That she did. But we are going to need her help if we are to defeat Wataru Sakuma. Serika held the hand I'd knocked away close. She looked back at me. Things will never be the same, but even still. Why are you looking at me like that? Like you're hurt.
他に取る手段がなかった。クルス・ノノには正体を感づかれてしまったから。
Indeed. And that brings me to another point, adventurers. I was wondering just how Nano Kurisu had known about the basement facility herself, and the fact that Senri Minamisawa was being held there. Now that we know that Sakuma is the true mastermind behind this plot, the last piece of the puzzle has finally fit into place.
何？
私は私のままでお前を生存させ続けなければいけなかった。そのためには彼女が邪魔だった。
Sadly, this isn't helping your case, Serika. Without warning, her body floated up and slammed into a nearby wall. There wasn't even time to think about it. I used my power without even realizing I'd done so. Similar? Well, I hate to break it to you, Takuru, but Mio was right about imaginary friends. You projected your own neglect onto Serika. So, sadly, as I said before, you have some partial responsibility to all this. But I digress.
友人ではない。私には友人など一人もいない。
Yeah. And the reason that Serika had no friends was because of you, Takuru. She is a byproduct of your own imagination and delusions. Everything you made her out to be, that is your fault. She knew what I was thinking.
それが私の能力だ。私はこの能力でお前を守り続けてきた。お前に生み出されてからずっとだ。
Keep me safe, you liar. Oh, she's not lying.
嘘ではない。
だから嘘はやめろ。
What? Why are you smiling?
相変わらずだ。自分にとって望まない情報が出てくると、まず逃避から入るんだな。
She's not wrong. In 6 years, no, in 8 years, and even before that, Takuru Miyashiro hasn't really grown up all that much, has he?
幼い頃から変わっていない。
Stop it.
私を生み出した時もそうだった。
Stop it. Yet another truth that you need to face if you are to move forward.
私はお前に生み出された存在。そしてお前を生き延びさせること。それ以外は私にとって二の次なんだ。
おい、くだらない思い出話なら死んでからやれ。
There was a low, fierce voice. It came from Kanasato. She went over to Serika and grabbed her by the neck, then slammed her into the wall. I could hear a horrible creaking sound coming from Serika's neck. Maybe she couldn't breathe, because her mouth looked like it was gasping for air.
お前たち委員会のその理屈じゃ、二の次のやつには何をしても構わないんだろう。
Unfortunately, Mio isn't wrong. Nerose, his collaborators in the Miwa Party and the Church of Divine Light, and the Committee of 300, and beyond as well.
やめなさい、ミオちゃん。
黙れ。私はこいつを。
Do you intend to kill all the other Gigalomaniacs as well, Mio Kunasato? Because if you did that, you would actually be doing Sakuma and the committee a huge favor by doing that.
らしくないな。思考がめちゃくちゃだ。まるで頭の中が沸騰しているようだぞ。
But Serika has the ability of mind reading, and, like Hanai Arimura, can perceive Mio's true intentions. Yeah. Try as you might, you can't hide anything from Serika Noe, Mio Kunasato.
私は委員会に協力していたが、属してはいない。お前のアメリカ時代の件とは無関係だ。
What happened to Mio in America, I wonder?
勝手に私の心を読むな。
She's trying to bury it deep within her mind, but it won't work. Kunisato's hands dug deeper into Serika's throat.
何を言っている？お前が考えるから私に伝わってしまうんだ。
I think that level-headed facade is finally starting to unravel.
まあ、考えるなと言っても無理か。白熊効果を直に感じたのは初めてだな。
The White Bear Effect. Never heard of it myself, so again, learning something new. White Bear Effect. A strange phenomenon observed in human thoughts. People who are told to suppress certain thoughts or not remember certain things actually think and remember more strongly than those who are not subjected to such suppression. The name White Bear Effect comes from an actual experiment where subjects were shown a photograph of a white bear and told not to think of it. Interesting.
お前別にバカにしているわけじゃない。手を離してくれないか。
There is no forgiving Serika Noe for the fact that she took Nono Kurusu's life. Unfortunately, In order to deal with Sakuma, we're going to need her help.
目的は話をすることだと言っただろう。ああ、望むなら委員会の情報も知っているだけ話してやる。
Was she able to glean some things from Sakuma's mind, I wonder?
有村がいれば本当のことかどうかわかるだろう。
Neither Hanai nor Mio can actually argue with that. Serika glanced at Arimura. Arimura took a frightened step back, then looked at the two of them. No choice. Kunasato let go, violently. Her hands were shaking, and there were red marks on Serika's throat. Yeah. Serika may have been imaginary in the past, but now that she's been rebooted, she's just as human as the rest of us. Exactly like Rimi Sakihata. And besides, Serika is not our true enemy. Kunasato took a long breath to calm herself down.
今回の事件を含めてこちらが聞いたことに関して全て話せ。自分で言った通り有村がいる以上嘘をついても無駄だ。
ああ。
Serika knows that only too well.
それから今のように私の思考を読んで会話をするな。頭の中が能力者に覗かれていると思うと吐き気がする。
With that said, Mio, if what happened to you in America comes back to bite us in the ass, that's your responsibility,
わか
not
った。
ours.
それで構わないか。
We don't need any more complications other than those we've already suffered through already. Don't add to our burden of troubles, Mio Kunasato. Serika suddenly looked at me. You've no choice but to take her at her word. I couldn't speak. Why was she asking me? Well, you made her who and what she is. All your insecurities, her dependency on you, that was all a part of your childhood imagination. And now it is standing right before you.
知りたいんだろう、真実を。
That's why the newspaper club was founded, after all. That's why Takuru Miyashiro went searching through thick and thin through all those urban legends.
お前は新聞部の部室でいろいろな仮説を立てては事件の全容を追っていた。確かにいいところまで言っていたが、最後に間違えた。
To be fair, we made several mistakes, and all of them came back to bite us.
佐久間や組織の存在に気づくことができなかった。
Yeah, because Sakuma wasn't on the suspect list at all. I made a mistake. That's right. I screwed up at the very end.
私がすべて知っている。お前がずっと追ってきた事件のすべてを。
Go on. Her words made me angry. It was as if she was going to tell me everything as a favor. Yeah, all that toing and froing, all the highs and lows, all the ups and downs, and all the pain and misery. And now Serika Inoue is just going to hand everything to us on a silver platter. I would say congratulations are in order, but...
バカにするなよ。僕はもう事件のことなんて。
何？
Serika seemed surprised. What difference did it make now? Yui and Nonna were gone because I tried to solve the case. They weren't coming back. Even if you had left it alone, Sakuma still would have gone ahead with his plans, and we would have been none the wiser. And
復讐なんて絶対に考えないで。危険なことはしないで。
unfortunately, Kurusu Sakuma has us right where he wants us.
何もかも忘れて、他の人と同じ日常を、だけど埋もれないように、強く、しっかりと過ごしていってください。
But even Kurusu made the same mistake that we did. Even she never saw past the facade that Sakuma kept around himself. Or maybe she didn't want to either.
もう危険なことはしない。
クルス・ノノのせいか。
That was a low blow there, Serika. Damn it, she was reading my thoughts again.
心配しなくても、私がお前を危険な目に遭わせない。むしろ、お前が危ないことをしないでくれると助かる。
Unfortunately, that depends on what Sakuma has up his sleeve.
だが、委員会と事件のことに関しては、お前も聞いておけ。今後、身を守るために必要となる。あと、
Indeed.
やめろ!
I screamed. I couldn't take any more. Stop it, Serika. Stop talking like you're on my side. You were the one who killed Yui and Kurusu, and you were the one who did that to Ito. No, it was Sakuma. Sakuma who did that to Ito. And it was Sakuma who killed Yui, not Serika.
理屈より感情を優先するのか。それが情報強者の取るべき態度か。
うるさい。
I know that. But what if I can't help it? I can't just calm down and listen to you.
今だけ割り切るんだ。どうせもうじき決着がつく。そしてどう転ぼうと 私はお前の前に二度と姿を現さない。
何？
だから今は割り切ってくれ。長くて24時間ほどの協力体制だ。それに黒里美代。
Serika pointed to the girl who'd been strangling her only a few moments ago.
取引だ。お前の望みを叶えてやる。その代わり今後宮代拓を預かってもらいたい。
なんだと？
順を追って話す。その途中でお前の聞きたいことを聞いていい。だがその前に座っていいか。壁に叩きつけられた時に腹の傷が開いた。
Yeah. That injury from Kurisu's D-sword. Serika went to the sofa and sat on the edge. Only then did I remember what Dad had just said. That he'd cut open Serika's stomach. When she sat down, she put her hand on her stomach for a second, and I saw that it was stained with blood. But what was eerie was her attitude. She'd been careful not to put pressure on it when she sat down, but she didn't look hurt. It was as if injuries like that were an everyday occurrence for her, and she'd given up on things ever getting better. Sounds like a certain someone, if you ask me. The Serika I'd always known seemed like a different person.
佐久間にやられたということは、あいつもディソードを持っているのか？
Most certainly.
質問は佐久間のことからでいいのか。
Serika didn't even bother wiping the blood off her fingers.
いや。
Well, she said she was going to start at the very beginning. So grab your popcorn, adventurers. This is going to be a long tale.
おい、有村。こっちに来い。
何ですか？
お前も座れ。長くなる。こいつが嘘を言ったらすぐに教えろ。
Oh, don't worry. As before, Serika has no reason to lie. But just in case. Kunosato didn't wait for Arimura's answer. She turned back and sat down across from Serika. Arimura still looked scared of her, but...
はい。私も聞きたいことありますから。
Because Hanai Arimura's own wish was to know the truth. She sat down next to Kunosato. I didn't want to go near her. Images of Yui and Nono's deaths flashed in my mind, and I couldn't think straight. There was no telling what I might do if I got close. I ended up leaning against a wall.
百瀬さん。新庄さんにも聞かせたい話です。電話をして、スピーカーでつないでおいてもらえますか？
Yeah, we need everyone on this.
わかったわ。
Everyone we can still trust.
それからさっきはすみませんでした。
何が？
Oh, Momose. Kunasato nodded to Momose. And then her expression tightened once more. Momose made a call and said a few words to someone on the other end, probably Shinjo. Then a moment later she nodded. Then Kunasato began.
まず根本的なことからだ。委員会の目的は何だ？
Indeed. What is their goal in all this? Because, yeah. Genishi and his, two other cohorts, even though they were a part of the Committee of 300, they broke away for their own ends. Of course, Genishi, being Genishi, betrayed his own comrades in turn, so that it could have Noah 2's unfathomable power for itself. So what was the Committee of 300 really intending to do with Project Noah and the Gigalomaniacs?
わからない。
は？
わかるといえば嘘になってしまう。そもそも私は佐久間と協力関係にあっただけだ。お前が盛んに委員会と呼ぶ組織のことは知らされていないんだ。
Yep. So Serika knows nothing about the Committee of 300, and Sakuma never told her. He'd
佐
be a
久間
fool
自身だ
to.
って委員会の末端組織でギガロマニアックスの研究をしていただけの人間だ。委員会全体のことは伺い知れない。
Ah. A very insulated hierarchy the committee has for matters of internal security. Only those at the very heart of the committee know the truth about its tangled, twisted web of conspiracies.
末端の組織というのは？
6年前、サードメルト、渋谷地震を起こした連中が属していた研究グループだ。AH 東京総合病院の地下の研究所を管理していた。
More flashbacks. I shook a little when I heard her say that. That was where Senri Minamisawa had been tortured. That was where Uki had been kept and forced to care for the patients. Yeah, if Sakuma was prepared to have Yui and Kurusu killed, there was no way he was going to spare Uki just because she was a child. Dad had been working for them. Of course.
今、渋谷地震を起こしたと言ったな。じゃあ、やっぱりあれは人為的なものだったのか。
Indeed it was.
人為的というよりも何らかのトラブルと聞いている。詳細は極秘で佐久間も知らされていないらしい。
Oh, it was no accident. Genishi Narose engineered the whole thing. Might not quite have been what the Committee of 300 intended, but then Genishi didn't give a shit about them. Or anyone else for that matter.
どうやら私の仮説は正しかったようだな。
And pray tell, what was that theory, Kunasato? What she said matched with most of Kunisato's theory.
渋谷自身が実験中のトラブルだとすると、委員会はそのせいで研究そのものを放棄したのか。
Indeed. The committee must have realized Genishi's betrayal and were afraid that, well, if one person could take their prized research away from them for their own ends, then someone else definitely could.
少なくとも佐久間はそう言っている。6年前、事故のせいで委員会は手を引き、地下の研究所も解体させられたと。
So then... Then why was all the data and computers still down there? Not to mention the surviving patients and Uki as well. When we went down there the first time.
しかも委員会はギガロマニアックスとは違う案件に力を注ぐようになったそうだ。佐久間は自分たちが切り捨てられたと怒っていたが、詳しくはわからない。
A different project, eh?
ギガロマニアックス実験の被験者たちが地下で放置されていたのもそのせいか。
そうだ。はしごを外された形の研究者たちは山添雨季をはじめとする被験者たちを持て余し、ああやって軟禁しておくしかなかった。だがしばらく経ってイレギュラーが発生した。
Serika glanced over at me.
白い光による能力者のことか。
ああ。
私はその光を事故によって飛び散ったギガロマニアックスの発生因子だと推測したが、その通りか。
そう考えていいと思う。佐久間も仲間の研究者たちとそういう話をしていたからな。
Well, to be fair, even I don't know all of Noah 2's capabilities and functionalities. And with Noah 2 destroyed and Genishi Narose dead, I don't think we'll ever know the scope of its true power.
仲間がいるのか。
いや、元の仲間と言った方がいいな。佐久間以外は研究を諦めて一応肩着でやっている。
So his colleagues abandoned him as well.
前に 宮代や有村が脳の検査をしに行ったクリニックの院長とかな。
Yeah. The people in charge of the hospital already had dubious ties with the Church of Divine Light and the Nozomi group. Ties that they desperately wanted to cut.
何？じゃあ、あのクリニックで撮った宮代たちの脳の断層写真は？
フェイクだ。昔のよしみで作らせたらしい。
So they were fabrications. Once again, we were all fooled. Serika kept talking. What she said should have been a shock to me, but so much had happened that it felt like I was no longer capable of being surprised. A sentiment I understand only far too well, Takuru. But we need to hear the rest of the story as well.
父さんが本当に
Indeed. This whole time, this photo was a lie. 4 orphans and a self-obsessed scientist. Well, I would say that it's a blessing that Yusho himself didn't have Gigalomaniac powers of his own, but then again, given what Sakuma intends to do on this day, even Yuto's life is in danger. He really was a part of this committee thing. A low-ranking individual, but yes. Dad, the guy who always drank too much. Dad, the lazy guy who got chewed out by Nono and Yui all the time, but whom everyone at Aobadorm relied on more than anything. Oh yes. Dad, the man I loved way more than the people who'd actually given birth to me.
何もかも全部
It was all a lie, fabrication, deception, illusion, delusion. It was all fake. When he'd been the head of Aoba Clinic, when he'd been the dad at Aoba Dorm, that was all fake. He deceived and betrayed us all. And then he killed Yui and Nono, who trusted him completely. Of course, Kurusu and Takuru were so focused on their shock that Serika was involved that they completely ignored Sakuma altogether. Of course, if Kurusu had realized this, she probably would have torn that letter up and thrown it to the wind. I could feel pain in my hand when I punched the wall, but it didn't help me forget any of the other things I was feeling.
Sakuma の目的は何だ?
A question that Serika can possibly answer this time.
言っただろう。イレギュラーで発生した能力者の始末だ。
違う。本当の目的だ。
うん。
能力者の始末が目的なら、もっと簡単に殺せたはずだ。 なのになぜこんな面倒なことをした？
Come to think of it, Takuru had a very similar epiphany. If the target of the second new generation madness was none other than himself, it would have been easier to kill him. In fact, yeah. In fact, a lot of this was staged so that Takuru Miyashiro would awaken to its Gigalomaniac powers.
11番目のロールシャッハ画像を現場に残したり、6年前と同じ日付に事件を引き起こしたり。
That's right. That's how this all began. The mystery was so compelling that I'd started to work it out with the rest of the newspaper club. And in the end, I decided that it was a game the killer was challenging me to. And I was wrong.
あれは委員会へのメッセージだよ。
メッセージ
？6年前、トラブルによって発生した危険なイレギュラー、つまり想定外のギガロマニアックスを自分が掃除してやっているというアピールとでも言おうか。掃除
Arimoto raised an eyebrow. I felt so furious that it took everything I had to stop me from using my powers.
ふざけんな！ユイをあんな風に殺したのは掃除だったっていうのか
Mimose must have seen me because she came over and whispered for me to calm down. I just barely managed.
想定外のギガロマニアックスというと、大谷や高柳、柿田、渡部、あるいはこいつらのことだな。
Kunisado pointed at Arimoto and I. Serika nodded, silently.
そうだ。佐久間は末端の組織の人間で、委員会と直接コンタクトする手段がない。だから、委員会が注目するような形で事件を起こしていったんだ。さらに、11番目のロールシャッハ画像、つまり本物の力士シールも、委員会にとって見過ごせないファクターだと佐久間は考えた。
Now once again I have a question. If Sakuma's intention was to get the Committee of 300 to notice his handiwork, then I have to ask, why haven't they dealt with him already?
あれは6年前の計画破棄とともにデータごと全て消去された。当然、一枚たりとも残っていてはいけないものだ。ところが、そんなトップシークレットがよりにもよって事件に使われ、ニュースで公開されたら、委員会だって放置はできないだろう。必ず佐久間に接触してくる。それが狙いだった。
But then something happened. Something that Sakuma probably didn't anticipate. The public started making their own versions of the 11th Rorschach, the sumo sticker. And with the media airwave buzz, things kind of got muddied. I would say that as a result, Sakuma's message was more than a little watered down.
データごと消去されたのなら、佐久間はどうやってあの画像を手に入れたんだ？
ある場所に画像が保存されていたんだ。委員会の想像もつかないような場所にな。それを取り出すことに佐久間は成功した。
というと
Somewhere where they'd never imagine.
脳の中だよ。地下で実験を受けていた被験者の山添右紀が連れていた老人を覚えているか？
The old woman with Uki Yamazoe. I remember too. That blind old woman.
無論あの老人だけでは何の役にも立たない。でも非常に珍しい能力を持ったギガロマニアックス山添右紀との組み合わせを発見したとき、佐久間は狂気していたよ。
山添の能力は他人の妄想をリアルブートしてしまう。それを使ったんだな。
そうだ、あの画像に取りつかれていた老人は食事を求めるように画像を求め、それを山添がリアルブートするようになった。そうして11番目のロールシャッハ画像は渋谷の至る所に出現し、佐久間はそれを回収して犯行に使った。ここまでやれば委員会が動かないはずがない。
Ah, so Sakuma used Uki to real boot the stickers all over Shibuya.
佐久間は委員会と接触することで何を望んだんだ？
自分が中心となったギガロマニアックス研究の再開。
In other words, though the two may never have actually met, Sakuma wanted Ganeshi's crown. A crown that he will neither have nor deserve. Not if we have anything to say about it. And fortunately, I do. But as for Sakuma, well, rather, Takuru, rather, that was all. That was the only reason. That was the only reason he'd done all this.
で、実際にあったのか？委員会からの接触は。
Well, Serika, your answer, if you please.
そのようだ。委員会は研究再開の条件として今回の事件の収拾をつけるよう佐久間に命じた。 そこで奴は私との約束を反故にし、宮代に全ての罪をかぶせて事件の収束を図ろうとしている。
I don't think the Committee of 300 would be too happy about a low-ranking scientist trying to blackmail them for his own ends. For the first time, there was a hint of disgust in her voice.
結局、佐久間に裏切られたわけか。なぜ佐久間はこいつを犯人に仕立て上げようとしている？
Kunosato pointed at me as she spoke.
本来であれば、事件は南沢千里が犯人となって決着するはずだったんだ。自殺という形でな。
But of course, we never found out what really happened to the original Senri Minamisawa. Whether or not she died in the experiments or whether she was killed in the wake of the third melt. Or whether she was exterminated by the scientists themselves. And since Senri herself wasn't there, her identity was taken by the unwitting Riko Haida. I was caught off guard by the sudden mention of her name.
と言っても実際は、お前たちも知っての通り、ハイダリコという別人だが。宮代拓、お前はずっと南沢千里が生きていて自分に復讐しようとしているのではないかと怯えていたが、それは杞憂だ。
Hearing you say that aloud is kind of embarrassing, actually, to be honest.
本当の南沢千里はこの世にはいない。確かに死んだんだ。そもそもあいつはお前を恨んでなどいなかったしな。
So Kurusu was telling the truth after all this time.
お前、南沢千里のこと知ってたのか？
直接は知らないが、クルス・ノノの思考を読んだ。
Ah. But then you had no choice but to fabricate the lie that you were present with Takuru when he first saw Senri being experimented on in the basement facility. Because in his mind, Serika was always with them, no matter what. But that ultimately drew Kurusu's suspicions. But if Serika had, if she had acknowledged the truth that Kurusu knew, then Takuru's suspicions would have been triggered.
また思考盗撮か。大した芸だ。
Unfortunately, telepathy, while it can be useful, is a serious double-edged sword. Having the minutiae of thoughts bearing down on you every single day of every single hour, constantly, it can wear down on a person.
皮肉はいい。とにかく佐久間は全ての事件の後、ハイダリコを南沢千里ということにして自殺させ、事件の幕引きにするつもりだった。だが、その計画はうまくいかなかった。
Because eventually we figured out the truth.
さすが宮代拓だと褒めておくが、お前たちはこちらが思っているよりもずっと早く事件の裏に気づき、すぐに行動を起こした。そのせいで殺す予定だった能力者が殺せなくなり、順番が狂ったんだ。
Serika looked at me for just a moment, then looked away. Yeah. Takuru was supposed to be the fifth victim, according to Sakuma's plan, which was a direct violation of Serika's promise. She was probably talking about Uki. Oh, they were going to kill a little girl like that. Indeed they were. I scowled at Serika as hard as I could.
So それで仕方なくハイダリクを先に殺したのか。
そうだ。ニュージェネの狂気の再来事件を途切れさせるわけにはいかなかったからな。
I felt disgust as I watched Serika talk coolly about murder. This couldn't be the Serika that I knew. And it's not.
それで最終的に宮代拓を犯人に仕立て上げようとしている理由は何だ。
実はよくわからない。が、委員会の指示かもしれない。
Possibly. I'd never even heard of this committee until now. Not many people have. So why?
覚えていないか。宮代自身が以前疑問に思っていたことだぞ。
何のことだよ。
能力者は一人で一つの能力しか持てないのかという疑問があったろう。
Indeed, that theory was sitting around in our minds for quite some time. That's right. That had come up when we were talking in the club room. In the end, we'd never come up with an answer, so we had to move on.
お前は私という存在をリアルブートした。これだけでも大した能力だが、その後、さらに別の能力まで使えるようになっている。渋谷地震で発生した白い光。それを浴びたものの中にはこんな例は存在しない。そうだな、久野里。
So Takuru's ability was powerful enough to bring a delusionary existence into reality.
ああ。今のところ、データ上は皆無だ。
だが、佐久間によれば、かつて佐久間たちの組織が研究していたギガロマニアックスというのは、そういうものだったそうだ。
One of them, at least, was definitely capable of that.
何？
サイコキネシスだの、テレパスだの、特定の力だけを持つ超能力者まがいではなく。
Yeah. Because their powers were rooted in perception and the manifestation of delusions. And if you're able to make a delusion seem real to someone else, the scope is limitless.
心の中に思い描いたどんな妄想でもリアルブートできる存在。それをギガロマニアックスと呼んだ。
Indeed, they weren't just limited by any one trait or ability.
つまり、本来のギガロマニアックスは能力さえ開花すればどんな力でも使えるはずなんだよ。
Yeah. But one stood head and shoulders above the rest. The Gigalomaniac, known as Takumi Nishijo, who in his childhood came up with the infamous formula that Ganeshi Narose stole and used as the foundation for Noah 2. Kunosato looked at me with narrowed eyes.
つまり、宮代拓は本物ということだな。そして、委員会は何らかの理由で、本物を危険だと考え、排除したがっている。
Not liking the smile on your face there, Mio.
推論だがな、6年前の事故に何か関係があるのかもしれない。私が話せることはこれで全てだ。あとは知らされていない。
Well, that was shorter than I was expecting.
どうだ、有村。
That's all the information we're going to get from Serika.
嘘はついてないみたいですね。
No, she's not. Arimura had been watching Serika with fiery eyes the whole time. Serika looked back at her, and after a moment's thought, she spoke.
ああ、その通りだ、有村。
Arimura leapt out of her seat. Serika read her mind.
だから勝手に人の心を読むな。さっきから考えていることがあるだろう。言葉に出さないと他の連中に伝わらないぞ。最低。
I think the person who deserves that appellation is Sakuma. There was hatred in her voice. When Serika didn't respond, it only angered her more.
セリじゃない、尾上セリカ。あんたは思考盗撮を使って能力者を見つけ殺していた。そうよね。
Yes, she did.
ああ。ラブホテルで柿田さんが殺された事件、どうして柿田さんの方を殺したの？
Yeah. That's been another mystery that has been rolling around like a pebble in the proverbial shoe. Why was Hanai Arimura left alive?
私も能力者だって分かってたんでしょ。二人であそこにいたんだから。簡単だ。私の能力と柿田の能力が同じだったからだよ。思考盗撮の能力者は邪魔だ。私や佐久間の正体がバレる。
So that explains it.
たったそれだけの理由で。私たちの計画には重要なことだ。ちくしょう、あんたのせいで。
At some point, Arimura started to cry.
そうだ。私がいたせいであの日柿田は死んだ。
Arimura reached into thin air and went to grab her D-sword, and then stopped. She looked down at Serika, tears running down cheeks that were red with rage. Arimura slammed herself back into her seat instead of grabbing her sword. Kakita was her best friend and confidant. In other words, he was as important to her as Kurusu and Yui were to Takuru. She held her arms tight to her body without bothering to wipe away the tears.
新庄さん、聞いていたか。
After a moment's silence, Kunasato spoke into the phone.
ああ。
あんたにやってもらいたいことがあるんだがな。
なんだ。
青葉寮にまだ捜査員が残ってるなら何とかしてほしい。あとマスコミも。
ああ。家宅捜索自体はもう終わってる。可能だと思うが、どうする気だ。
場所をそっちへ移す。佐久間の調査と、あと山添由紀を私たちの目の届くところに置いておきたい。
Yeah. Uki and Yuta are in danger. But it might be possible, just barely possible, to pull the wool over Sakuma's eyes while he's distracted. Not much of a long shot, but it's what we got. It was several hours later when Shinjo called us and told us that all the police had left Aoba Dorm. We were all loaded into Momose's car, and Shinjo told us which routes to follow to get there without hitting any checkpoints. I would say that we're home again, but this was never Takuru Miyashiro's home. In fact, the only home that he really has left to go back to when all is said and done is with Gen and the others at the RV in Miyashita Park. But we have more pressing matters right now.
ん百瀬さんは？
フリージアに戻りました。別の線からいろいろ調べてくれるとか。
Yeah. Her investigative skills would best be used elsewhere,
そうか。
and we cannot rely on her to deal with Sakuma directly. Shinjo was waiting for us in the living room. He stood somewhere he could observe Serika. Right now we need to find Uki and Yuto. I suddenly felt the familiar smells of home and felt just a little better. Only for a moment.
ここはやっぱり僕の家だ。
It had only been a little while since I left to find Kurusu, but it felt like a long time.
ここに来るまで大丈夫だったか？
はい。
No trouble so far. I nodded back, but it felt like the whole town was going crazy. As I crouched in the back seat, I would sometimes look up and peek out the window. It was bizarre how many people there were. The sun was only just starting to rise, but there were groups of people partying everywhere. Through the closed windows, I could hear irritating laughter. The Shibuya Restoration Festival.
みんなが浮かれてる。うちの署は全員街のあちこちで警戒に当たってる。
Shinjo must have seen the look on my face.
僕を探してるんでしょうか。
いや、そうでは。
You don't have to cover. He was about to shake his head, but...
すまん。正直その可能性が高い。復興祭でいつもより人が多いのは事実だが、ネットは見たか？
あ、いえ。
I hadn't felt like it. Yeah, online social media is gonna be a shitstorm, like
君を捕ま
usual.
えた者に懸賞金が出るというデマが広がっている。
God damn it, Sakuma.
Huh?
That can't be a reward.
もちろん、警察はそんな発表はしていない。逆にデマだと発表したんだが、それが分かっていないのか、仲間と一緒に君を探している連中も多いらしい。
These people.
デマだなんてみんなわかっているさ。
何？
Shinjo looked at Serika with animosity in his eyes.
ネット上の祭りというのはこういうものだ。連中にとっては情報が正しかろうと間違っていようとそんなことはどうでもいい。そうだろう、宮代拓。
Unfortunately, for some reason she seemed a little happy. She was right. That was the basic mechanism for internet festivals. People with no critical thinking skills whatsoever.
黒里さんと和樹たちは。
I wanted to change the subject, so I asked about the people who weren't here.
久野里さんは1回、佐久間が仕事で使っていた PC の中をダメ元で漁ってます。花たちは。
Yeah. Sakuma wouldn't be so careless to leave his personal information or his private information on that laptop computer of his, or any computer here. And speaking of which, Arimoto glanced at Serika before she spoke, sorry.
ゆうとくんも一緒にウキの部屋にいてもらってます。近くにいない方がいいと思ったから。
Well, to be honest, I'm a little relieved. If Sakuma really wanted to take the screws to Takuru's psyche and sanity, he would have had Yuto and Uki with him as insurance. I think actually we might be able to use that to our advantage, so to speak. For now, at least. And sadly, throughout this whole ordeal, it's easy to forget that somewhere in a hospital, or even, probably even here actually, somewhere in Aoba Clinic, Shinji Ito, our other friend and companion, is now nothing more than a drooling, mumbling vegetable, thanks to what Sakuma had pulled. Arimoto didn't come out and say it, but I knew that she meant close to Serika.
ウキは大丈夫かな。
ええ。ゆうとくんのおかげと言っちゃなんですけど、自分がしっかりしなきゃって思ってるみたいです。そういう時の女の子は強いですよ。覚えておくといいです。
Well, Yui needs to look after somebody, and that somebody is Yuto.
そっか。
Yui and Kirisu have been the same way. Whenever they had someone to protect, they were stronger than anything. And yet, even they had their weaknesses.
あとは父さん、佐久間がおかしなことをしてこなければいいけど。
Well, I had to rain on your parade, Takuru, but if he wasn't up to anything, we wouldn't be going through this hell.
それは心配しなくていい。佐久間は私と宮代のことにケリがつくまで有村や山添には手を出さない。
Well, as I said before, we can use that to our advantage.
ねえ、あんたさ。
It was a challenge in Arimura's voice.
まるで仲間みたいな顔して言うのやめて。めちゃくちゃ腹立つから。
She was clutching her hands into fists so tightly that they turned white. Her lips were shaking a little. All traces of an expression vanished from Serika's face. It was impossible to see what she was feeling. And then the intercom rang. I looked and saw that it was from the exam room on the first floor. It was probably Kunosato. I hit the answer button and put it on the speaker. Better give us the abridged version, Kunosato.
宮代か。
はい。
佐久間が普段使っていた PC は診察室のもの以外にあるか。
いえ、ないと思います。
He probably wouldn't have one lying around either, as far as I knew anyway. Dad, though I didn't want to call him that now, had hid everything from me and the others.
おい、尾上。ここの他に佐久間が隠れていそうな場所は思い当たらないんだな。
ああ、
Serika answered Kunosato's question. During the hours while we waited for the police to leave Aoba dorm, Kunosato peppered Serika with questions. Most of the questions dealt with the nature of the committee, rather than the case itself. But, as she said before, Serika doesn't really know the inner workings of the Committee of 300. I heard a lot of words I'd never heard before, and I don't think anybody but the two of them understood most of it. What struck me the most during that time was the rage on Kunosato's face. Her face was twisted into something terrible, and sometimes she would slam her fists down onto the desk as if she were trying to stop herself from strangling Inoue. Was it because she was saying things that confirmed your suspicions, or the fact that she was unable to answer many of those same questions? She must have really hated the committee. It seemed like it had to do something with what happened to her when she was in America, but I couldn't ask her anything. Once again, Mio, if what happened to you in the past comes back to bite us in the present, we tried to give you an out before, and you didn't take it. But I wonder... Yeah, it wasn't just the Committee of 300 that was investigating certain technologies. In America, it was Victor Condria University that was developing the visual rebuilding technology as well. I could hear her working at the computer over the speakerphone.
ダメだな。何も出ない。おい、尾上。
なんだ。
お前が私に与えられる情報はこれで全てか。
Yes, Serika nodded.
なら、宮代を私に預けるというのはどういうことだ。
She did say that. That's right. I hadn't gotten the chance to ask that. Serika had said that at Frisia.
言葉通りだ、黒里美代。お前には今後、宮代拓を可能な限り生かし続けてもらいたい。
はあ？
私はこれから佐久間の指定した場所へ行く。もちろん一人でだ。
Serika looked at me as she spoke. Huh? Yeah, she's really gonna do this.
あいつはお前を連れてこいと言っていたが、それに従う必要はない。私は必ずあいつと差し違える。だからお前は黒里美代の手引きでこの町から逃げるんだ。あいつが死んで真実が明らかになれば、いずれお前の無実も証明されるだろう。
A well-conceived plan. However, there is one fatal flaw with it. This will not unfold the way that you intend. Especially with Sakuma involved. Unfortunately, he may not have telepathy like you do, but he's going to see right through this.
なんで？
お前はもう危ないことはしないんだろ？
Of course. If we go after Sakuma, then Takuru is plunging himself back into danger. And that would be breaking the promise that Kurusu had asked him to make posthumously, and also not to seek revenge. Of course, that was when she didn't know that, that was because she didn't know that Sakuma was the true mastermind behind everything. If she had known, she would have instead said, "To hell with that promise." No, that's not right.
なんでお前がそんなことするんだよ。
私の存在する理由がお前を生かすことだからだ。
私がそいつを引き受けるとでも思ってるのか？
I didn't think so, Mio. Kunisada's voice was cold, as if she thought the whole thing was a bad joke.
受けてはくれないか？
当たり前だ。私は委員会に復讐するためにここにいる。ギガロマニアックスのお守りをするためじゃない。
宮代拓郎を渋谷の外に連れ出せば、お前の望みが叶うかもしれないぞ。
え？
Kunisada felt silent, as if she was thinking of something. What? What was going on? It's hard to tell behind Serika's blank gaze and emotionless face, but I believe that is going to be it for this episode of Let's Play Chaos Child. And when we return, we better put our game faces on, because I'm pretty sure that if we don't move, Sakuma will, and it's not going to be in our favor. As always, adventurers, until next we meet.